Well, hello, and thank you for joining us, Terry. My name is Rebecca Chaplin, and I serve on the Barnardsville Elementary Parent Advisory Council. Our goal for this interview is to help families and community members better understand the challenges and opportunities facing our school and our community. So, thank you for the time. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us. Our
It's
first question for you, Terry, is can you introduce yourself and explain your role in serving the Barnardsville community?
well, thank you all for inviting me to join you today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. And yes, I was first elected in 2020, and I've been serving on the Buncombe County Commission since then. At that first time, I only had part of Barnesville, but I love Barnesville. I have a real affinity for it. I live out in Sandy Mush in a very rural part of the county as well. So I feel very at home in Barnesville. So I was excited when the next time I ran, they had changed the districts. And so actually now, since 2024, I have all of Barnesville in my district. And love that because I spend a lot of time out there, whether at the fire department meetings, community center, been to your Barnesville Elementary School many times through the years, and actually enjoyed having lunch out there one time with your school board member, Anne Franklin. I think that was last year we did that, and that was a lot of fun. The so I It's my pleasure to serve and help out in any ways that I can for the Barnesville community. And in light of this conversation today around education, just so you also know, I'm the chair of the School Capital Commission for the county commissioners. And so I serve on that in that capacity, and I've served on that committee since I was first elected in 2020, and I'm now chair.
Wow, well, that really reflects your care and concern for our community schools. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, given your knowledge and experience with school systems, what's your opinion on why strong public schools are important to the future of our community?
Well, for me, and just so you know, I used to teach many years ago, back in the 90s, and I used to say this to my students, and I still feel very strongly about this. For me, a good education is about having opportunities. And I'd always tell my students, I was like, it's not saying that you're a better person because of your level of education, but it gives you more opportunities. And to me, that's what it's about. We want everyone to have opportunities. And just feel that is so important for us, right? And so free public schools is about being accessible to all children within our communities and also being publicly accountable as well. And so that's really important because that way, it's not just about a few getting a good education or this or that, but it's about the ability for all of us, for all of our children to get a good quality education. And that's important on a community, it's important on an individual level to those opportunities I spoke about. It's important on a community level to strengthening a community. And I would argue it's very important on on our democracy level as well, for being able to have that really good quality of education for everyone.
Mm, thank you for sharing that. And what are some of the biggest challenges facing rural schools like
Mhm.
Barnardsville Elementary?
Well, I'd say one of the biggest challenges is with what we're seeing population wise, right, with changes. And we see that across the counties in North Carolina, like counties losing, more rural counties losing population. But specifically in an area like Barnesville, you have your really sweet, wonderful elementary school there. And I know you all want to keep that and fought for it previously, got it back. And and so I think, schools are funded based on population. The student population is part of that funding formula. And so that's one very real challenge. I'll share just a small personal story. I mentioned I live in Sandy Mush, and what used to be the school out here is now the community center. And so it was my father, he went, my grandparents went there. My father went there up through, I think, elementary school, but it closed down in the 60s. They closed that. And so I never went to school there. But I still hear from community members, obviously the older generation that did get to go there, and some community members that it really made them very sad, right? Um, it did kind of change that environment because you had a community school and we lost that, and so then everybody would go to Leicester now, and it was interesting. I mean, there were some in the community at the time that felt it was better to consolidate and go to Leicester because they felt there were more opportunities there and because of a larger population. And then, of course, there were those who felt like, oh no, we lost having that community school. So there's varying opinions around that. But I do think that's one of the challenges that when you have these schools in more rural areas that are potentially losing population. I don't know that Barnesville is actually losing population, but it may just be that your um, youth population is not growing. And we see that somewhat even just in the county in general. Our schools in general are losing that. So that is a real challenge. And then I also think about the so this is where it ties in with like the parent involvement. So I'm so glad with y'all taking this active interest and then like the community involvement and everything too, because we get out of anything what we put into it, right? And so I think when I think of our school, like, and I, with Barnersville specifically, right, that sweet school right there in your community, and to be able, you've got to have everybody caring about that, not just when you have kids there. And that's part of what's really important, right? Because our youth are such an important part of our community and like the ability to really strengthen the education for them and all of that wrap around it. It's not just about learning the math and the reading, right? That's important, but it's so much more than that too. And so I think about our teachers and the tremendous job that they do. And the reality is, I was talking to this lady the other day, and she said, well, it actually all starts at home, right? Like it's not just about we're going to drop them off at school and they get this certain amount of education. It's like, what do they come into school with as well? And so that's where I feel like as a community, it's so important for all of us to care about our schools and to be involved and thinking about like what we do within the communities to really strengthen not just the education, but just the support around youth. Like what are the opportunities that we're providing? So that's everything, when I pull it out and think of a county aspect, I think about, the importance of safe housing for everybody in our community, right? And especially after Helene, that's on so many people's minds. I think about our healthy food, and I know y'all have some wonderful farms out there in Barnardsville. And I think about, the importance of making sure that we continue to support our farmers and so that we have access to healthy food. And then I think about those after school activities that are important. And I know we worked really hard to get your swimming pool back up and going and everything too, so that kids have that opportunity to have something healthy and positive to do in the community. So there's all of those things that really make a difference in all of our lives, but definitely in our children's lives. And so I think, we need to keep investing in our communities and those resources and making sure that there's those healthy opportunities, positive opportunities for our youth.
So we really appreciate you being here again with this. My name is Mary Beth Anderson. I'm also uh, a part of the advisory council as well as a mother to a first grader. This is a different time because I have a 25-year-old daughter as well. So having had her in public school and now 20 years later starting all over again, it's different. You see a lot of
Mhm.
changes in the last 20 years. But as a parent, I know many families care deeply about our school and want to know how they can support the students, the staff, and the teachers. How can parents become more involved in supporting our local schools?
It's a great question. I think so. obviously one thing that y'all are doing is so important, like being involved in this right way, right? That's extremely important. So I think that kind of organization that you're doing and that kind of paying attention and getting involved, extremely important. I'm going to pull it out just a little bit and share just some because I think also just what I realized from doing this work is how there's a lot of kind of people just aren't as clear on like what the county's role is, the state's role, those type of things too. And I think that kind of awareness and education for people is really important because then it helps you for advocacy reasons. It could help community members that care too for advocacy. And so just to give you a sense, so the state is responsible. They are constitutionally mandated to support free and public education in our schools. And what we've been seeing over time is some of that state funding has been um, reduced over time. And so the counties, what we are responsible for is school capital. And I mentioned earlier at the beginning that I'm on the school capital committee. So the counties are so they are mandated to provide like, keep your school maintenance up, build your new schools, all of those type of things, anything around that school maintenance. Now, the reality is Buncombe County does a whole lot more than that because we actually are providing operating additional funding that helps with the teacher supplements and all that, as well as operating. But that is well over and above. And so just to give you a little bit of a sense of that, I was looking back at some of the numbers and in in 22, the funding like the that was going to non-capital, just kind of like your local current expense, they call it, was a little over 87 million. And I'm combining Buncombe County and Asheville City because we do that as one budget line. So this is combining that. The largest percentage of that's to Buncombe County schools though, because it's based on your per student population. So that was over 87 million. This current year with what we just approved in our budget last night, so 87 million back in 22, now 128 million. So that is more, well, basically a 50% growth, right? And that's just the local current expense. So that's not even counting the capital, which is the part that we're actually mandated to do. And the capital is that back at that time in 22, it was around 26 million, and it's kind of been creeping up over time to where it's getting closer to around 30 million in school capital as well. So that gives you a sense of the amount of funding that the county is putting in to our public schools. And back at one time, the percentage that I thought of as like state, federal, and county was like state was around 60%, federal was around 20%, and the county was around 20%, like from Buncombe County. And I think, or, as far as their budget, and it's now, I think the federal is down to 10%. The county and state's still right around 60. It kind of dipped there for a few years. It's right around 60%, but the county's up to 30% that we are funding of Buncombe County's budget, not counting capital. So you can really see how over time the funding that we are putting in is growing. And so one thing is just, I think I want people to understand like that's where your property taxes are going to, right? That's what it's for. And a lot of people, I think, don't have that understanding about like where is that money going? And I'm like, it is just the largest percentage of our general fund goes to education. It's over 30% now of our general fund, and that is going into education. And that's Buncombe County Schools, Asheville City, and AB Tech. And then additionally, we put funding into pre-K because we know how important that is into pre-K
Mm.
education. And we also do some additional funding that helps out the schools or like some additional school community impact funding. We help with some of the school nursing contracts is additional on that. SRO, some of that funding's additional on top of that. So you can see that that's where the investment is. So I just think it's really important for people to understand that. And I realize that people too, when they say Buncombe County Schools, they think they're county employees, and they're not. Buncombe County Schools, they're state employees. They're not part of Buncombe County government. They're separate. That's the Buncombe County Schools. And so just in having conversations with people over time, I'm realizing there's just kind of a lot of misunderstandings around all this. And so, like, we provide like that funding I'm talking about, but we have no oversight of the schools. So we don't have any
Mm.
kind of input into how the schools are run or all that. You have a school board, and they're the ones that have that kind of oversight. Most states, the school boards have taxing authority. So they make their budget decisions and then they're the ones that set tax and that, with that. But here in North Carolina, county commissioners are the ones that have all the taxing authority. So the school boards, they come, the schools come and ask for money and we provide money, but we have no oversight with them.
Okay, and my next question you kind of had already went into. We had talked about how school enrollment, like parents often hear that enrollment numbers affect funding and staffing.
Mhm.
How important is school enrollment into maintaining programs and resources at our little school like Barnardsville?
Yeah.
I think you kind of went into that already, but to go back to what you were talking about with when we were speaking to Representative Prather 2 days ago, we got into the school resource officer discussion because we currently share one with the school 15 minutes away. So we would really like to have some type of who to talk to, how we can get some type of information to move that along so we can get a dedicated school resource officer. And I know our school is small, but being 15 minutes away from where the officer is, that's and again, just coming from a mom who was a mom 20 years ago, that wasn't something I worried about 20 years ago.
Mhm.
That's something that we unfortunately have to worry about even in our rural, I can't say that word, and even in the rural, edit all that out. The rural communities like we are, it's definitely on the forefront of my mind.
Yes, and that's something that to work with your school board on, and I know that they advocate for that. And there's state, I think I'm sure Representative Prather went into that. There's funding formulas at the state with that, and so there's a certain amount of funding there. But definitely, that's your school board. You could work with them to address that. The additional part that like whatever that funding formula is like then the part I was talking about, end up paying on top of that because even when there's funding for the resource officer to go to the school, then we're paying for their vehicles and all of that additional, which so we're paying that for all of them. Like that's not funded.
Gotcha.
There's no funding for that coming through the state. It's very limited how much they do give you, but so we're covering all the additional costs on top of it. So
Mm,
even however many you get, then the county has additional costs on top of whatever is being
Gotcha.
provided to fund them.
And see, that is something that we didn't know. So this is so important for us to be able to have these
Mhm.
conversations because we wouldn't have even known who to ask about that. So we really appreciate you. Thanks for talking to
Yes.
us today. I'm going to turn it over to
Yeah.
Heather.
You're
Yeah. Hey,
welcome.
thanks, Mary Beth. Thank you, Terri Wells, for being here with us today. My name is Heather Morgan. I'm also a parent of a first grader at Barnersville Elementary School and also serving on the Parent Advisory Council. What role can local businesses and churches and community organizations play in helping schools succeed?
I think that it is vital for your community, for those organizations to get involved because like I said, it's not just for the teachers, right? And it's not only for the parents when they happen to have children in the schools. Like the way to really keep our schools vibrant and to build a stronger community is for the community to circle around the school and get involved. And so there's so many ways, I mean, they obviously reach out to like your organization, like your parent organization is a great way to connect. Um, I'm I'm guessing there's somebody at the school. Often schools kind of have, often it's the school social worker. I think about that sometimes is a really good person because I know my church, what we do is we reach out, our pastor reaches out to the social worker and finds out what the needs are within the community. And then that's a way that we help provide additional funding to support students. Do that especially around Christmas time, but we do that around other times as well, right? So there's things like that that I think. And so for you all, I mean, and sometimes it's not because businesses or churches don't want to. Sometimes maybe they're just not thinking about it. Maybe they've just not been asked, and not everybody's necessarily proactive. So I highly recommend, really thinking about strategically what would benefit Barnardsville. Like, where are there some gaps? Where are there some needs? And then advocating to those community organizations and saying, hey, this is a way that you can get involved and really help us strengthen our school and to have that community pride. And I know in Barnardsville, there's a lot of community pride. So I'm
Yes, there
sure
is.
definitely. And that's one of the things I love about our small rural communities, right? Is because there is that
Mhm.
pride and that sense of place. And so I think definitely reaching out, just helping them understand like where there's some gaps, where there's some needs, and then, building those relationships over time and keeping them involved. And that is a way to make sure that people aren't just thinking about schools when they have children in them. We've got to make sure that people still care about our schools even when they no longer have children that are attending that school, because that's how we really keep them strong for everybody.
That's right. Absolutely. And then my last question is, if parents remember only one thing from this interview, what would you like them to remember?
Say it is important to invest in our community, which means investing in our schools, and that we always want to leave our community and our schools better than we found them.
That's right. Thank you. On behalf of the Barnardsville Elementary Parent Advisory Council, thank you so much for your time, investing your time today with us, Terry, and sharing your insight and your knowledge and experience, and for your commitment to our students, our staff, and our community. And we'd also like to thank the families who submitted questions and took an interest in our conversation today. And obviously the success of Barnardsville Elementary depends on strong partnerships between families, educators, community leaders, our small businesses, churches, and elected officials. Together, we can continue to create opportunities for every child to learn, grow, and thrive. Thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate you investing your time with us today.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure getting to chat with you, Heather, and Rebecca and Mary Beth, and I look forward to seeing you when I'm out in Barnesville.
Thanks so
Great,
much.
we'd love that.